Hey there, thank you for watching PT Bubbles. This video is going to be all about the PT Cruiser rear end, and we'll be doing a lot of rebuilding and replacing parts in the back, like the shocks, like the sway bar linkages. If your PT Cruiser is equipped with a rear sway bar, not all of them are. Replacing the Watts Linkage Assembly, which is the bell crank and the rear control arms. There's some naming terminology that we'll talk about there. We'll also talk about, or at the end of the video, I will show the final torquing sequence that I do to tighten up things in the rear end. During the video, I put on there what the torque specs are so that you know if you're doing this work and you want to torque it as you go. You won't see me do that. I'm just using like impact wrenches and things like that to, or just torquing it by feel, by hand, and I've done it so many times that I can get it close. But then I show you that I do the final torquing with a torque wrench at the end, and then also at the end we'll do the final drum brake adjustment to make them tighter. This will also tighten up the parking brake, and you'll see that at the end as well. Quick note about the PT Cruiser that you'll be seeing in this video. This is one that was purchased for my niece, and kind of an interesting story about it is that the place I bought it from, the folks, it was a nursing home, and this PT Cruiser was used by the assistants and the nurses there. So I kind of feel good about giving it a new home. It served a good purpose, and I hope it continues to do so for my niece, and I want to make it something reliable and put some TLC into the car that I feel it deserves. So nice little tidbit about that. One other thing, you may see some footage from a couple PT Cruisers like mine behind me and my brother's purple one, that to do some of the steps, some of the processes in the video. That's because there was about 1 to 2 days of lost footage from what I took while filming the red PT, the 2001 PT, which, by the way, that's what you'll be seeing is a 2001 PT Cruiser, which is part of the reason it has that rear sway bar. That was more common in the 2001, 2002 years. So the other PTs, if you see them, are 2003 and 2004, which is essentially the same. They're almost exactly the same. One thing I did notice when adjusting the rear brakes is that, some of that brake drum hardware is slightly different on the inside of the brakes. So like the star wheel that I'm adjusting looks different on the 2001 versus the 2003 or 4, but that could also be just an aftermarket kit in who knows what you're going to get when you order, a drum rebuild assembly, and those little parts might look different depending on who the maker or manufacturer is and what year you're working on. as we start taking parts off of the back end, and you see me do this, you'll see the rear end start to come down a little bit at a time, because every shock, every sway bar link, and the Watts linkage assembly, as I remove those, we're removing all the support that's holding that rear end up. And I did not support the rear end like I should have, and like I hope you do if you do this. Put some jack stands, put just a floor jack, some wood blocks, something to prevent that rear end just from dropping to the ground like you see it do with me. It's not the safest thing to do not to support that, of course. I mean, you can definitely get hurt, especially if your leg or your arm or your body is underneath while you're removing things and that rear end were to just drop on you, and it's heavy. So don't do what I do in the video. Take that to heart. Support that rear end when you're working on it. Let's talk a little bit about the Watts linkage assembly. First of all, the terminology. In the service manual, it's called the Watts linkage assembly, and it's the bell crank and the 2 Watts linkages, or the Watts links. That's what the service manual calls them. But if you were to go online and to look for these components and these parts, rockauto.com or wherever, you might see them called different things. The centerpiece that the control arms or the Watts links bolt to, that's called the bell crank. Sometimes it's called the Watts link or the Watts linkage when you're trying to order it or buy it. Same with what are actually the Watts links according to the service manual, which are the arms, the support arms that bolt to the bell crank and to the frame of the car. They could be called Watts linkages or arms or rear control arms, left and right, passenger or drivers. So take note of that. When you're looking for those 3 pieces that comprise the Watts linkage assembly, they're going to be called anything from Watts link to control arm. So keep that in mind. Furthermore, if you are going to be replacing one of those parts, or something's going up with that whole linkage assembly, my advice and what I do is replace all of them, both of the control arms and the bell crank, or the Watts links and the bell crank, the whole Watts linkage assembly. They are not very expensive parts. If you get them, you can get that whole setup for maybe $100 or so. I think it's worth it. For a couple reasons. One, because you're getting brand new parts totally on the back end, which is a good thing. But the disassembly and reassembly is a lot easier when you get these parts when you have all new parts and you can pre-assemble them off the car, and you just torque the bolts down. I think it's like 10 foot-pounds plus a half a turn to torque each arm to the bell crank. Very doable off of the car, and then you can take all 3 pieces as an assembly and mount it up in the car, where you do the serious tightening on the control arms on the frame and then on the bell crank to the rear axle. Another reason to just replace them all, I've tried doing one like just the bell crank that had failed on another PT, and the control arms, especially after 20 years or however long, if they've never been replaced, they're stuck there. I mean, I had to use a pry bar, and I was and a sledgehammer trying to get that thing to separate, the rear control arms, also called the Watts links, from the bell crank. That was not fun, and you're doing a lot of banging and smashing, and it's like, just take it easy on yourself and on the parts, be safer, and have a whole new assembly. So that's my recommendation, is if you're going to be replacing one of those components, if it's feasible, financially, and if it makes sense, just do all of them together. For torquing, you'll see me using impact wrenches, tightening everything up as we go through the video. And then at the end, I do the final torquing sequence with a torque wrench, and you'll see that. But it's also important to note that because we're dealing with suspension in the rear end, the service manual says that those final torques need to be done at curb height. That means with the vehicle, the rear end suspension fully compressed, like the vehicle's just sitting there not on a jack or anything like that. So to accomplish that and to have the room to actually get under there and torque stuff, you just support the axle, not under the wheels, or you could do it under the wheels. I didn't because I was still adjusting some brakes, but you would want to raise the vehicle and support it on the axle. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I did to do the final torquing is I just got a floor jack under the rear axle, jacked it up pretty high so that I could fit under there to do the torquing, and then put a couple jack stands underneath each side of the rear axle and took the floor jack out. So that gave me plenty of room. It put the suspension was compressed like it should be at curb height, which is what the manual calls for. So all of the components that we replace require that. I should say that too. So to do that final torquing at curb height, it's going to be important for the watch linkage assembly, the shocks, and the sway bar links. So make sure you do that. There's been a couple times where I did not. I just torqued it without being at curb height, thinking it would be good enough. And in 2 instances, there was some squeaking, creaking noises that developed in the rear end that had been freshly rebuilt, and the folks would complain that it was squeaking, so I had to go back in and tighten those. So take care to do that curb height torque. It'll make a difference and hopefully prevent some noises and squeaks and stuff coming from your rear end. Okay, we're into the last section, tightening the brake shoes manually with just a flathead screwdriver underneath the car on the back side of those drum brakes on the support plate. And before you get into that, know that in a fully functioning, everything's working brake setup, you don't need to do this. Okay, it is self-adjusting. It is automatically adjusting. The system is, so you're most likely safe not to have to do this. I'm doing it because of my own for my own reasons, and because I like having a parking brake that's a bit tighter, a bit more snug, and you can just feel a little bit of a difference on the brakes when you apply the brakes normally when driving if you've tightened up the back brakes. And I'm not, when I do it, you'll see I don't tighten these like to where the wheels don't even spin. And actually the service manual does say if you are manually adjusting the brakes like this, the rear brakes, if they are drum brakes, that this is a process you can follow, and you want to tighten them only to the point where there's just a slight drag on the wheel, and that's what I'm striving for. Okay, so if your rear end of the car is raised and you spin that wheel, if it just spins freely, that's going to mean you'll have to apply a little more brake power, or you won't get as much pressure from the back end, and your parking brake won't be as tight, and I've seen that cause the vehicle to be more prone to roll. So that's why I'm doing this. But please keep in mind, it's not required, it's not necessary. This is going an extra mile to go in and do this tightening. I just like to do it, and like I was saying, and just make sure you don't overdo it. It's just meant to make those wheels just have a slight drag to them. They can still spin by hand, but they'll come to a stop sooner because there's just a slight drag from the brake shoes in the rear brakes pushing against it. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Okay, to adjust the rear drum brakes, the way the brake pads get pushed outward, or the tightness against the drum, there is that star wheel that you saw me adjusting from the front side. Well, you can't get to that when, of course, the wheel's on. So there is an opening in the back of the support plate of the drum assembly that you can put in a flathead screwdriver, and I find that a short one like this one works best to get in there, and you can adjust the star wheel from the back side. So I'm going to show you that real quick. There's the opening. Well, that's the opening on the back of the drum assembly, that little oval opening, and inside there is the back side, is the star wheel, and you can put your screwdriver, your flathead, in there and rotate it. Okay, I'm having a hard time seeing it myself, but it's in there, and so we're gonna do that now. And what I like to do, and make it tighter until the wheel here, you know, if I'm just spinning it by hand like this, I just want it to have a little more catch, a little more drag, so that it maybe spins like that much, you know, just like. But right now, this one's loose and it'll spin like that. So I just want it to just grab it enough to hold that wheel, or stop the wheel pretty quickly. What that means is that the brakes are going to grab harder and sooner when you push on the brake in the car. Okay, it'll just help with the amount of braking power in the back, and how quick you can stop. So. You got to find where that star wheel is, and once you do and you catch it with the flathead, you can push down on the back side of the screwdriver, and that'll rotate the star wheel in a way that will be spreading those brake pads out and tightening my brakes. Man, this one is being a pain though. Actually, you know what? Looks like I got it just enough to do what I wanted, so I can move the wheel by hand, but it's not really spinning freely, so that will do the trick of improving the braking, which will also make your parking brake tighter, so you don't have to pull the parking brake as high up. Let's do the other side. On the driver's side, that opening right there. Now you can kind of see the star wheel right there. Okay? That's pretty good. Yeah. So now the brakes will be tighter. When you push on the pedal, it'll brake a little better, a little more braking power in the back end, but the parking brake is also going to be tighter, allowing you to, you know, pull it so it's more effective. The parking brake, when it's not adjusted tight, oftentimes can be pulled up pretty dang far, like up to here or so. But once you've tightened those back brakes, that's it, you know, just about level with the seat, but that's nice and snug and tight. That'll prevent the car from rolling. So that's how and why you want to tighten those back brakes every now and then. I should say that normally they're supposed to be self-tightening. You know, anytime you go in reverse and hit the brake, that's supposed to help rotate the star wheel. That pushes up the pads. Backing up and braking, backing up and braking. And you can do that if you want to make it happen faster. You know, just go out and do a bunch of reverse stops, and it's supposed to make those star wheels get rotated by the mechanism inside the drum brake. But sometimes I find it effective, especially if you're back there doing work on the rear end or in the brakes, just to grab your flathead screwdriver and adjust those so you get better braking and definitely a better parking brake. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, got something out of the video, and it was helpful. Really appreciate it. Keep watching, there'll be more. Got a lot of videos I'm working on. So take care. See you soon.